Lots of roster changes in the last 12 to 24 hours. All of this happening before the Saints even take their first snap of practice in 2025 training camp. We'll break down day one, talk about all the changes and what's to come. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. Let me start off by saying thank you, Honey Badger. And I mean that sincerely. That was a 12-year NFL career. Look, Hall of Famer by all accounts. I don't see how he's not going to wind up there one day in Cooperstown. In that 12 years, he had 5 with the Cardinals, 1 with the Texans, 3 with the Chiefs, and luckily he got to finish his career. New Orleans native, Louisiana guy, one hell of a football player, last 3 years with the Saints. In that 12-year career, 36 interceptions, totaling 530 interception return yards and 4 touchdowns, 838 tackles, 11 sacks, 100 passes defended, and 15 total forced fumbles and recovered fumbles in his career. Turnover playmaking machine. With the Saints, when you look at his last 3 years collectively, he started all 51 games the Saints played. 228 total tackles, 10 interceptions, 195 return yards, 1 touchdown, and combined for 5 forced and recovered fumbles. So he kind of carried on those last 3 years exactly how he started his career. You knew this is the tough part when it comes to him because you knew when we signed him, he was still great football player, but he was knocking age 30 at that point. And you knew at some point, you know, for all the times undefeated and it was going to kind of catch up with him. But for the most part, he played collectively 3 really good years with the Saints. And his first 2 seasons were really, really good. But that decline kind of started to show itself last year. Now, to be fair, he dealt with once I don't think there was any, unless they kind of kept it hidden or he kept it in, any major injuries. But it seemed like lots of nagging stuff where he would, like we said, didn't miss a start, didn't miss a game, played in all of them, but he could kind of miss some time in there where you'd see him on the side, come off the field on the sideline for a bit, have to do some treatment, come back in. There was a couple of games where I don't think he was quite able to finish. So I think the decline we talk about was a result maybe of age, maybe the injuries he couldn't quite get over, or kind of started picking them up because of the age. But I think it kind of just went hand in hand. And when you look back on, we had such a bad season, and I was guilty of this at times, kind of banging on Honey Badger a little bit, but you know, several months removed, and you take a step back, and it was like, man, he was the warrior last year. He always was in his NFL career. Whatever limitations he had, really, I don't think were his fault and shouldn't be blamed for it. And the rest of the team was not necessarily playing well either. Normally, I say normally, most of his career, he would have been picking up a lot of slack for a lot of the players who weren't playing very good on the defensive side. And we were used to seeing that. And when it didn't happen, we put misplaced. I know I did. And I apologize to that. I pretty sure I've done it at various points in the offseason, but to make sure it's official, since we're talking his retirement, I apologize for letting that happen because it shouldn't have. Because we should have been, as I am now, appreciative of what he did give us in 3 years. And one thing he definitely gave us was a strong locker room presence on that back end. And all along, I took this approach of this offseason, going into this season, that whatever we could get out of him, fantastic. And maybe if he was healthier, we could get him a little back to that level we had him the first 2 years, which was pretty much on par with his whole career. But with us going younger, having a guy like him in the locker room was huge. And I think even if we wouldn't have got, quote unquote, the production on the field we needed or were expecting, the leadership value alone, I think, was massive. And I think that's going to be sorely, sorely missed. And overall, the caliber of player he was, especially in his prime when he was just a holy terror for offenses to deal with, appreciate watching that over his career and definitely appreciate everything he gave the Saints the last 3 years. Will say that um, to wrap up what he did last season, with all that I just said being said, 62 total tackles, 3 interceptions, and 3 combined forced and recovered fumbles. He was still definitely at times a force to be reckoned with back there. Even pointed out by Kellen Moore, and I had totally forgotten about this till Kellen Moore mentioned it in his press conference yesterday, going, man, he had a huge red zone pick against us when I was with Philly and we came in here and played y'all or played the Saints in week 3. Like, oh yeah, that pick doesn't happen, then the drama at the end of the game never happens because we're solidly behind and in trouble. He steps up and makes a huge play. There was some fault with his play at other times in that game, and I think as a microcosm, it's a good example of what his overall season was. Yeah, sometimes you could nitpick some stuff. Yeah, he might have been dealing with some nagging injuries that slowed him down a little bit, but at least at one point in a game when we really needed to, he steps up and makes a play. So gonna end this segment the same way I started it. I salute the Honey Badger. Thank you very much for your NFL career. Thank you very much for your contribution for the Saints, the last 3 of them. Now, pivot to kind of how quickly a roster turnover change can happen. It sounded like in the press conference, it wasn't unexpected. Honey Badger was retired yesterday, but they may not have necessarily had an extreme amount of advance notice. Kind of sounded like a couple of days that they knew and they acted very quickly. I'm about ready to go to bed last night, and all of a sudden Twitter pops up that started with the rumors, and then evidently we did it. We went out in free agency and signed free safety Julian Blackmon. If you're not familiar with Julian Blackmon, just say it up front. Very solid NFL player, 5-year career. I believe he's a 3rd-round pick for the Colts in 2020. He did start 14 of 15 games as a rookie that year. Played like a rookie, but he was played very decently for a rookie, I should say. 2021, he started 6 games, played in 6, but in practice following that 6th game, he tore his Achilles and was out for the rest of the year. 2022 started 11 of 14 games. 2023 played primarily as a box safety that year, not as a free safety. 15 games, started off 15 of them. Last year, they returned him back to free safety. I think technically he played week 1 as their strong safety again, and then they moved him back to free safety. Started 16 of 16 games that he played in. But in that first game, tore in his right shoulder the labrum in week 1 and managed to tough it out for 15 more games that year or last year. To a 5-year career, like you said, very solid football player, versatile football player. And we'll break down a little bit in where his alignment over those 5 years. But you kind of say with him that there's some injury concerns there. You know, he's never played a full season of games. One major one, that Achilles in his 2nd year, a major one last year with the torn labrum. But I mean, hell, he played through it. You got to give him credit for that. I mean, and so he's a tough guy. He's got to be. Run around playing safety and trying to make tackles with a torn labrum in your shoulder cannot be fun. In his 5-year NFL career, 300 total tackles, 10 interceptions for 101 yards, 1 touchdown, 21 pass defended, and he's got a combined 6 forced fumble and fumble recoveries in his career. So again, solid player and some turnover ability and something you really want to see back there at free safety. If you go look at his PFF grades year to year, again, his overall grade is going to show you he's a fairly solid player. Last couple of years, he's graded out 60%, 69% or higher. So he's kind of in the top end of safeties. But when you look at his individual, some years he graded out better as a run defender, some as a pass defender. Um, so I say solid in the aspect of he does some good things at sometimes and appears at other times struggled a little bit, but he went through multiple head coaches and defensive coordinators. I believe he had 3 over those 5 years. Could very well have something to do with it. And in last year's grade, playing with a bad shoulder, We'll break that down a little more in a second. Also, might have had an effect on him. But as far as being versatile, and this is one of the things that excites me about us signing him, because he's been available free agent for a while, is that he has in his NFL career 2,704 snaps at free safety, but he's got 556 as a slot corner. He's got 811 as a box safety, 49 on the defensive line, and 21 as a wide cornerback. So primarily free safety, but can move around and do some versatile stuff. And he basically had one whole season where he was a starting strong safety. And even in that season, when you look at a snap count, they used him in multiple roles. Something I think that if Brandon Staley's doing what he says he's going to do, and everybody thinks he's going to do, and kind of showed somewhat in OTAs and minicamp, guy like this fits in very, very well. Overall, his best two seasons were 2022 and 2023, those two back to back years. And one of the things that really stood out that year was his missed tackle percentage rate was elite. It was right around 8% for both years. Last year, it spiked all the way up to 15 plus percent. It's almost doubled. Could have been a result of the shoulder, but for the most part, in his career, he's been a good tackler, except for last season. And this kind of goes back to keep him healthy. If he can stay healthy, especially if we can stay healthy and we can get a full season of games out of him, even if he doesn't win the starting role, because look, Sanker may come into play on this. Howden's still floating around there. They signed Terrell Burgess, who's back there. That's not to mention one of the corners. There's been talk sometimes about if they could play free safety. So I don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but I would think he's going to get a legitimate shot. He's done it in his NFL career at being able to play that free safety. And when they want to go to like two high looks or quarters or anything like that, he's a guy versatile enough to help. If you still need him down in the box or want to scheme that way or whatever happens, post snap forces an adjustment, he can handle it too. And he is a very big pickup for the Saints in this signing. Like, I'm not saying he can replace Honey Badger. I don't think you can ever say, I don't care how good of a football player coming in can replace a Hall of Famer. But if he can anywhere near approach the contribution Honey Badger gave us, especially the first two of his 3 years here, and bring a leadership component in there. He's been in the league 5 years and he's been a longtime starter for the Colts. That's all good things that can fill some holes and help this defense. And you got a little bit younger while you're doing it because he's still under age 30. You still have a few seasons left. You feel like in what he can contribute. And there's nothing to say that he won't improve and get better being locked in this type of defense with the versatility he's bringing. We talk a lot about scheme fits and not fits. You kind of get the feeling he's going to be a scheme fit. So I feel like, in my opinion, the Saints have brought in a very solid replacement to get into that free safety mix with the chance to start. And like I said, never be a true replacement for the Honey Badger, but a guy that can take over the role and do what we need him to do in that role. As camp opens, the Saints tight end room is suddenly down three players. Now, the unexpected one, Dallin Holker, retired yesterday at some point after Honey Badger. I completely missed it till today because most of the focus was, in fact, on Tyrann Mathieu, and in my opinion, rightfully so. No disrespect to Mr. Holker, but now let's focus on the fact that he won't be there. And he's a guy that when I was looking at the long shots that we did on the last video, it's like an honorable mention. I had some stuff out on him, but I was like, I just don't know enough. Like, and I don't want to use the word hype in a bad way, but there was a lot of hype coming in. Doug Barone, our tight end coach at the time, loved the guy, was excited, was on record saying about how good he's going to be in the NFL. But unfortunately, an injury in preseason last year or in training camp just basically wiped out the first 5 weeks, almost all of that practice time in the first 5 weeks of the season before he came on. Never really established himself. Did get some snaps. We did see a little bit of him, like 3 catches for 21 yards, but not really a whole lot. but still surprising that he retired. But I thought might be able to jump in the mix. I just didn't think if I had enough to say, yeah, he's really a guy to keep an eye on in camp. And now he announces retirement, creating a hole along with two players we knew. Now, Taysom Hill was almost 100% going to be on the pup list to start training camp. There was a slim chance he'd be ready, but you know, after his appearance at OTAs and in minicamp when he was very involved, although he was not doing anything physically, the closer you got to training camp and there was nothing more coming out about him, you realize, yeah, that minute less than 1% chance is now zero. He won't be back. So then it became a question: is he pup with a chance to return at some point this season, or they basically IR'd him, which means he was done? And at that point, it would likely be the last time we would have seen Taysom Hill. Would have been his last play last year in the game he got hurt. So there's still a chance he can come back. Foster Moreau also started on the pup. That one was a little more questionable because there was some coming out of that OTA minicamps. There was some thought it was going really well in his rehab. He may be ready to go at the beginning of training camp, and that could still happen. He may not stay on the pup very long, but to me, if he was close to coming back where he would only be missing a few practices, they likely wouldn't have put him on the PUP. But you never know. We may see him as early as next week. It's still up in the air. Now, they were repeatedly, Mickey Loomis and Kellen Moore yesterday. God bless the New Orleans media because they tried a couple of different questions with a couple of different ways, with a couple of different follow ups to get a timetable on both of them. There isn't one, not one they were willing to talk about. They made it sound positive. It's like, look, we're expecting him back. It sounded like sooner than later, especially in Moreau, but it's ambiguous at best. Positively ambiguous is kind of how I'm describing how they handled that whole conversation. So we'll keep an eye on it. And like I said, hopefully Moreau soon because we need one of them definitely on the field and almost 100% it's going to be Moreau before Hill. Is when you look at after Juwan Johnson and Jack Stoll, that's the two primary tight ends right now on this roster. Okay, and it's not a bad situation to be in. I'll pop the video up here. We covered this whole thing when we were talking about 12 personnel, how it's being used, and how it would affect the Saints. One of the ways that it could negatively affect the Saints, or we can't use it if we can't find more than two tight ends to be able to take the field and be able to stay in it. Now, this opens up massive. They had opportunities before this, but now with Holker out of the mix, it increases their all chances of getting some reps and turning some heads and trying to work their way in because it is two slots at the top end of the depth chart that would be occupied by Moreau and Hill. That right now they've got a shot to, I don't know, to work their way up that high, but to definitely work their way in the conversation. Of course, Michael Jacobson, who was here last year and on the practice squad, Maliki Matavea, our seventh round pick, Trayton Welch, Seth Green. Welch was here last year. We signed Green back in April or May, I believe. So it's an undrafted free agent guy that came in. Opens the door for all of them to go, hey, I want to make this roster. I want to make the 53 and push as these injury issues aren't resolved by week one to be able to get on the field and do something. I think it's good that you have um, that many opportunities with that many players to grab it, to seize it. Like we talked in the last video about Bub Means, who started off very slow in his rookie year, including the first 5 games, but was thrust into a role where he responded fantastically in a very hard, tough situation until he got injured and was lost for the year. That opportunity exists for these young men, and want to see one or two of them grab it, develop. You know, that's the thing that we're going to need to see from these players when they're given the opportunity, and Lord knows they are given the opportunity. And if they don't, I would say very good chance the Saints are going to wind up jumping into the free agent market once again. There's two tight ends that one's intriguing and Noah Fant. Seattle just cut him to make room for their rookie Rojo that they drafted out of Miami because it doesn't seem like they have a whole lot on their roster behind him. And Gerald Everett, who was with the Chargers when Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator there, Brandon Saylor was obviously the head coach, probably the top two guys. But if you look a little further down the tight end list, um, you've got a bunch of names you would recognize as kind of they've been around in NFL uh, locker rooms and teams. You know, recently we had a tight end, Nick Vannett, a few years ago, kind of fits that bill. In fact, I think he might still be back on the list. So if you have to go the veteran route, there's still some names there. Everett's older, but he was very productive, especially in his time at San Diego. He may be a quick fix or a fill in if you need more veteran presence. And Fant has just been the guy that Denver and Seattle, who's think he's played well enough, but always had a higher ceiling. People were expecting him to hit that he just never quite seemed to do. But as a low risk, high reward option, both Fant and Everett, you know, no crazy contract. I could see them, especially if Hill looks like he's going to be out for a very extended period of time, like is very possible. See them dipping their toes in that free agency market and looking at a couple of those guys. This would normally be the point of the practice report for day one. Right now, as I'm finishing this all up, I'm a little ahead of time right now as far as when the players and coaches talk to the media. That ought to be happening shortly because practice just ended. And right now, not so much focused on a typical practice report as what the offense did, the defense did, the injury report just on day one, especially seeing on Twitter some of the people in attendance. It was not exactly ramped up yet version of training camp. But a couple of things of note did happen, although we knew this was going to happen. The quarterback competition, Rattler ran with the first team, the ones today. Tomorrow it's expected to be Tyler Shuck to run with the first team. And now, according to the press conference yesterday, this is going to be natural. It seems like one quarterback gets a shot on the day and then another one gets his turn the next day. Two things on that. The reason why Kellen Moore said he wants to do it that way is he does want them questioning at any point in practice, am I supposed to be in with the ones or am I supposed to be with the twos? Sounds like just a clearly defined role for the day. So you don't think about that. Think about what you have to do while you're actually getting your reps in. Makes total sense to me. Other thing is they said repeatedly, and by they I mean Kellen Moore and Mickey Loomis, that Jay Kane are still in this thing. So for now, it could be a three-man day to day to day situation. They Moore said Decker, wherever they can work him in, he'll get what he can get. So right now, not as strong as an option as the other three. We'll see how it plays out. But the other thing that they said yesterday is, look, it's going to take as long as it takes. And we're not going to name a starter till we're ready to name a starter, however long that'll be. And I'm paraphrasing again, a New Orleans media repeatedly asking follow-ups of the very same question to go, when can you tell us when there's going to be this, who the starting quarterback is? It's going to take as long as it takes. Is pretty much the answer. I think the other thing today where it kind of dovetails in is you had 7-on-7s, of course, but first time they did 11-on-11s where they're running full offense, full defense. Now I know they still got some, Kellen Moore mentioned yesterday, still got some installs and stuff to do, and think that's as they're working on that. In addition, they're going to work on fundamentals every day, and then they're going to get into these because they're in shells today. These livelier versions, 7 on and move into 11-on-11, but you still don't have contact yet. And I imagine when the contact ramps up, that's when we're really going to hear and see what's going on with the players, the young players, and how they're working out on things. So future practice reports, I imagine we're going to have a lot more to talk about in this portion than necessarily we did in day one. The only other thing, and it is of note that I hate doing the I report. I hated it all last year doing training camp, but so far, seems today, two guys on pup. We've already talked about them. Everybody else is reportedly healthy, and as far as I can tell, everybody left practice the same way. That's a streak we have to keep going as long as we possibly can. Kudos to the players, the staff, Ted Rath, everybody, because we could not say that last year after our first practice. We lost Blake Kendra Miller like the second, third, fourth snap of practice. I mean, it was very early. So I would like to build a streak of consecutive days where I get to say nothing new to report on the IR report. So that's what we got for you today. I'm gonna normally I try to get videos out around noon, and did it today just to kind of keep on schedule and kind of because I knew there was likely not going to be a whole lot going on as far as the day one practice. Um, but delayed filming till I could kind of more or less confirm that, and I think it did. So we're gonna expect a little later start time, especially if I can get to make some practices in person. So probably through the remainder of training camp, probably be mid afternoonish. Hopefully, once we get the practice in, see what's going on, hear what's going on, get some of the post game comments, especially when Kellen Moore is going to talk or some of the players are going to talk. Be able to include all that too, and get a very solid, detailed when we get to the reports of what the offensive defense and the unfortunately the I report, what's going on with those. So just to clue you in. First time here, you like what you saw, please thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you can for me. Channel growth is fantastic. Algorithms loving me, and this is the point of the season. We kind of got through the just a slow period of July, and now we're going to see and hope and all pin our expectations on these young players, this new coaching staff, and see where it's going to take us and what kind of season we're going to have. And for me, right now, it's an exciting time to be the Saints fan, so I hope it is for you. And until the next time I see you, I'm Tim. Peace out and hoot out.